Note-taking for consecutive interpreting. David Violet here. I'd like to talk a little bit today about practicing. This is one of my big points, right? That you will need to practice for a long time. I often tell the story about how I practiced actually for almost 2 years. You won't have to practice for 2 years to get to be pretty proficient, but you should keep actually practicing throughout your career, which will be a lot longer than 2 years. And it's with practice that you will learn how to overcome all the terrific problems that pester us with note-taking for consecutive interpreting, right? So what happens is we are writing away and suddenly we realize that we didn't quite listen to something, or we are listening and we are trying to write down, but we're not quite sure what we should write down, and our mind starts fixating a little too much on that, and it starts to inhibit our good listening. Well, the way to overcome that is to just do it over and over and over again, to practice, just like somebody practices on a musical instrument, and just like the way you practice with your foreign languages, the way you learned them. But you need to practice the right way. And one of the main points I'd like to make about practice is that you need to always distinguish between form and substance. This will be important in your thinking, in your analysis, in your self-correction. And it will be very important when you're working with a colleague. Because if I say to you, let's say I'm your practice partner, and I say, I don't like the way you said, let's say the economy got worse that year. Now, you don't know whether I'm saying that you got it wrong, in other words, the economy actually got better that year, or it wasn't really the economy, it was industry. You don't know that. Or if I'm saying, you've got the substance right, but I would use different words. So it's not just, in that specific situation where you need to distinguish as you're correcting someone. It's actually something you need to bear in mind all the way through. And one of the most important ways you need to make this distinction is in your practice time and the way it breaks down. When you are doing a consecutive practice with a colleague, you don't want to end up correcting each other and going into the fine points of vocabulary. Now, there is a time for that, and it's very important. That's how you can broaden your vocabulary and make it more accurate and more precise. But it's actually not what you're there to do when you're practicing consecutive. You're there to actually learn how to take notes, listen at the same time, and then using your notes, give back the content, give back the substance. So it is part of your practice, that is enriching your vocabulary, but it should actually be something that you've determined on the basis of your deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is a process that I mention a lot in my courses. It's a way of practicing with a specific model in mind, where you are constantly getting feedback, you are constantly identifying your weak points and devising exercises to work on your weak points, etc. There's a lot to be said about deliberate practice. Anyway, your deliberate practice will identify your weak points, and if you happen to end up identifying as your weak point your breadth of vocabulary in a B language, for example, or even in an A, well then yes, during your practice you will have as a specific goal to get your colleague to help you to find the best terms to express what you're trying to express. So if it's on the basis of that analysis and that determination and that well-defined goal, which is to improve your vocabulary, then you will spend more time on the form. But even if you spend a lot of time on form, the main reason you are practicing and the main critique you are looking for from your colleague who is listening to you is how well you are implementing the method. The method being, you listen to an utterance, you understand the substance, the meaning of that utterance, you note on your page what you will need to jog your memory when it comes time to express what you understood, and then you pass on to the phase of actually giving your interpretation, looking at your notes, and giving your interpretation. Your colleague is there to help you to find out where in this production chain, if you will, there's a weak point. And that is the main objective of your practice. Now, the way I usually define it, the way I prescribe it, and this is something I got from Danica Seleskovich, who I know you know is a great interpreter. She's passed away, I think, in 2003 or so. But she was the inspiration and the theoretician behind the school where I learned interpretation, ESIT, École Supérieure d'Interprètes et de Traducteurs in Paris. Anyway, she would say, first, give feedback on whether the method was being used, whether the person is not falling into the bad habit, not ceding to the temptation to do transliteration, just saying a word because it sounds like the original word. So the first comment should be about whether the method is being used. The person is speaking from understanding, and whether the person actually understood. If the criticism pinpoints the fact that you actually didn't understand, well, then now you know your weak point. Either you were not listening entirely, and that's quite possible and quite likely because you were thinking about how to note something down, or you didn't understand because it's difficult. It's maybe something about the source language that you have a weak point in, or maybe there's a weakness in terms of the actual subject matter. Maybe they're talking about something that you are very unfamiliar with, and even though you're pretty good with the method and with the language used, you don't really understand what's going on. Then you take that criticism, and that will help you to work on that weak point, the weak link in the chain, which in the case we're talking about is someone who does not really have good understanding of what's being talked about. Interpreters are jacks of all trade. Obviously, when we come into a conference, we're not experts, but we need to have done our preparation, and also throughout our lives have been doing our best to become fairly familiar with almost everything. So anyway, getting back to the topic of practice, you do need to make this distinction between substance and form, and generally speaking, so the beginning point will be a comment on the method. Did the person actually understand? Did the interpreter actually understand and express that understanding in natural language, accurate language? Secondly, whatever went wrong in terms of the substance, how important was it? What were the worst points? What were the major points? Were there main points that were missing so that the listener could not even follow, or were they just details that were missing? We need to have sort of a hierarchy of the importance of what is missing in terms of the substance. And the person listening to this criticism needs to get a feel for that. And the person will have to be thinking about, okay, was it in my listening? Was it in my note-taking? Etc. And then at the very end, as the third part, you will spend, I would say that Seleskovich would say, I guess, she never specified to this level of detail, but maybe 10 or 20% of your practice time at the end of each analysis, of each speech, of each critique, of each interpretation, at the end, maybe 10 or 20% of the total time will be dedicated to actual form, to vocabulary. Was this said in the best way possible? What are the actual terms for what the person meant to say? So there is a quick video here about how to practice. There's a lot more to be said. Please do, if you think this is interesting, please enter your comments below, subscribe to my channel, and you can like this video. And I'm going to put up a QR code, and down below there will be a link where you can access my free mini course on symbols. Symbols are very handy. People tend to think that they're more important than they really are, but you do need to have a few dozen good symbols to make things a lot easier for yourself. So anyway, use the QR code or use the link below to take this short mini course on symbols. I think I have some pretty good ideas there, how to combine letters, how to use words and things from other languages, etc., on how to create your own symbols. So I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you in the next video.